The edge of known fear, Dr. Mira Castellanos pressed her palm against the rough bark of a towering amethyst tree, its surface warm despite the storm clouds gathering overhead. Threxos had been humanity's newest frontier for 8 months now, and still, the colonists huddled in their reinforced settlements like frightened children. The military had drawn red lines on every map, kill zones where the Vorak roamed freely, leaving nothing but scattered bones and torn metal in their wake. "You're insane to go out there alone," Lieutenant Jax Winters had told her that morning, his scarred face twisting with concern. The brass already lost 3 scouting teams to those things, 6-limbed nightmares with armor like starship hulls and claws that can slice through titanium. Mira had simply shouldered her research pack and checked her field scanner one more time. Someone needs to catalog the ecosystem beyond the safe zones. The xerophyte luminosa only grows in high-stress environments. If we can synthesize its compounds, we might have a breakthrough in neural regeneration therapy. Now, 3 kilometers into the purple wilderness, she questioned her stubbornness. The forest grew denser with each step, twisted vines creating a canopy so thick that Threxus's twin suns barely penetrated the gloom. Her scanner detected movement, always movement, but nothing approached. The very air seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The ground beneath her feet had been solid moments ago. The mudslide hit without warning, a torrent of purple soil and debris that swept her legs from under her and sent her tumbling down a steep ravine. She struck an outcropping of crystalline rock with a sickening crack, her left leg twisting at an unnatural angle. Pain exploded through her nervous system as she lay gasping in the mud. Her comm unit had been torn away in the fall, its pieces scattered among the alien ferns. The scanner's screen flickered weakly before going dark. Above her, the storm finally broke, sending sheets of violet rain cascading into the ravine. Mira tried to move and nearly blacked out from the agony. Her leg was definitely broken, possibly in multiple places. The military's search protocols meant they wouldn't look for her until she missed 2 check-ins. That was 18 hours away. In this weather, in this terrain, she would be long dead. By then, as darkness crept across the alien sky, Mira pulled her emergency thermal blanket around her shoulders and tried to stay conscious. The forest came alive with sounds she couldn't identify, clicking, rustling, the distant roar of something massive moving through the canopy above. She thought of her research, of the samples she'd never collect, of the discoveries that would die with her in this god-forsaken ravine. The irony wasn't lost on her, a xenobiologist killed not by the creatures she'd come to study, but by simple gravity and bad luck. That's when she heard it, the deliberate crack of branches, the soft splash of something large moving through the mud-choked stream beside her. 6 glowing eyes emerged from the shadows, followed by a form that made her blood freeze in her veins. A Vorak had found her. The monster's mercy. The creature stood 8 feet tall at its hunched shoulders, its body covered in overlapping plates of natural armor that gleamed like obsidian in the dim light. 6 powerful limbs ended in razor-sharp talons that could have disemboweled her with a casual swipe. Its elongated skull housed 3 pairs of eyes that glowed with an inner fire, each one fixed on her broken form. Mira had seen the aftermath of Vorak attacks, the settlement walls torn apart like paper, the evacuation shuttles reduced to twisted scrap metal. Every briefing had emphasized the same point. These were apex predators, driven by an insatiable hunger for destruction. They showed no mercy, no intelligence beyond the cunning of a perfect killing machine. But this one simply watched. Her! She pressed herself against the rocky outcropping, her broken leg screaming in protest. The Vorak tilted its massive head, studying her with an almost curious intensity. When she whimpered from the pain, those 6 eyes narrowed, not with predatory interest, but with something that looked almost like recognition. Minutes passed. The creature made no move to attack. Instead, it settled onto its haunches with surprising grace, its tail curling around its feet like a cat. The comparison would have been amusing if she weren't certain she was about to die. "Go ahead," Mira whispered through chattering teeth. "Get it over with." The Vorak's response was the last thing she expected. It rose smoothly and disappeared, back into the forest, leaving her alone with the rain and her confusion. She waited for the sound of returning footsteps, for the final attack that would end her suffering. Instead, she heard only the steady patter of precipitation and the distant rumble of thunder. 20 minutes later, it returned. In one of its secondary limbs, the creature carried something, a cluster of bright yellow fruit that she recognized. From her botanical surveys, the Threxan sweet fruit was not only edible to humans, but packed with nutrients and natural painkillers. It placed the fruit carefully beside her, just within arm's reach, and retreated to its previous position. Mira stared at the offering, her scientific mind reeling. This behavior made no sense. Vorak were supposed to be mindless killers, evolutionary, engines of destruction. They weren't supposed to show compassion. Hunger eventually overcame caution. She reached for one of the fruits, her movement slow and deliberate. The Vorak watched but made no threatening gestures. The fruit's flesh was sweet and cooling, and within minutes the natural compounds began to dull the worst of her pain. "Thank you," she said quietly, not sure if the creature could understand human speech. Its response was a low, thrumming sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr. One of its middle arms gestured toward the fruit, as if encouraging her to eat more. The night deepened. Mira found herself studying her unlikely guardian. Now that terror no longer clouded her observations, she began to notice details that the military reports had missed. The creature's armor wasn't just protective, it was scarred. Deep gouges marked its flanks, and one of its secondary limbs moved stiffly, as if an old injury had never properly healed. Most telling of all were the marks on its head. 3 parallel scars ran from its left eye cluster down to its jaw, the unmistakable signature of human plasma weaponry. "You've fought my people before," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the rain. The Vorak's glow dimmed slightly, and it shifted its weight with what looked almost like discomfort. When it met her gaze again, there was something in those alien eyes that transcended species barriers. Pain, loss, a weariness that came from too much violence and too little understanding. Scars that speak dawn on Threxos painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, the storm's fury spent in the night. Mira woke to find her alien guardian still watching over her, though it had moved closer during the dark hours. The thermal blanket had slipped during her restless sleep, and she realized with a start that something, had carefully tucked it back around her shoulders. Her leg throbbed with each heartbeat, but the swelling had gone down slightly. The sweet fruit had helped more than she dared hope. When she tried to shift position, the Vorak immediately perked up, its 6 eyes focusing on her with obvious concern. "I'm okay," she said softly, then felt foolish for talking to a creature that couldn't possibly understand her words. But the Vorak's response suggested otherwise. It made that same thrumming sound from the night before, and gestured with one clawed limb toward a small pool of clear water that had collected in a depression in the rocks. Fresh rainwater, perfectly clean and within her reach. Mira drank gratefully, studying the creature as it settled back into its watchful pose. In the morning light, the scars on its body were even more pronounced. Some were clearly old, raised ridges of healed tissue that spoke of battles survived. Others looked more recent, angry. Red marks that had not yet faded to the pale silver of ancient wounds. "What happened to you?" she whispered. The Vorak's glow flickered, and for a moment its massive form seemed to shrink inward. It lifted one of its primary limbs, the one that moved stiffly, and touched the plasma scars on its head. The gesture was achingly human. In its vulnerability, Mira's breath caught. You remember. You remember the fight." She pulled out her field notebook, one of the few items that had survived the mudslide intact. With careful strokes, she began to sketch the creature's form, noting the placement of each scar, the way it held its injured limb, the subtle changes in its bioluminescent patterns when different emotions seemed to surface. The Vorak watched, her work with obvious fascination. When she showed it the drawing, its 6 eyes widened, and it made a series of complex clicking sounds that might have been its version of surprise. "You've never seen a drawing before, have you?" Mira realized. "Your people don't make art." The creature leaned closer, studying the sketch with intense curiosity. One massive talon extended toward the paper, stopping just short of touching it, as if afraid to damage something so delicate. Mira tore out a fresh page and began a new drawing. This, when showing the Vorak not as the monster from military briefings, but as she saw it now. Protective, gentle, scarred by violence but not consumed by it. She added details that no human had ever been close enough to observe. The way its armor plates shifted color with its mood, the delicate membrane between its secondary talons, the almost flower-like arrangement of sensory organs around its primary eyes. When she finished, she held the drawing out toward the creature. "This is you. This is who you really are." The Vorak studied the image for a long moment, then did something that nearly brought tears to her eyes. It very carefully took the paper between 2 talons and pressed it against its chest, over what she assumed was its heart. The thrumming sound it made was different this time, deeper, more complex. A sound of recognition, perhaps even gratitude. For the first time since arriving on Threxos, Dr. Mira Castellanos felt like she was truly doing science. Not the kind that dissected and catalogued, but the kind that sought to understand. The kind that built bridges across the vast gulf between species, one careful observation at a time. She had come to this world looking for a plant that might heal human minds. Instead, she had found something far more valuable, proof that healing was possible between enemies who had never tried to understand each other. The question now was whether anyone else would believe her. When worlds collide, the rescue team's voices echoed off the ravine walls long before Mira could see them. Major Kane O'Loran's distinctive baritone cut through the morning air, sharp with barely contained worry and frustration. "Castellanos! Where the hell are you?" The Vorak immediately went rigid, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to a deep, pulsing red. It rose to its full height, positioning itself between Mira and the approaching sounds. She could feel the tension radiating from its massive form, not the predatory readiness she'd expected, but something closer to protective alarm. "It's okay," she whispered, reaching out to touch one of its armored limbs. The creature flinched. At first contact, then seemed to relax slightly at her gentle tone. "They're my people. They're here to help." But even as she said it, Mira knew how this would look to the rescue team. A human scientist, injured and vulnerable, with a Vorak standing over her. Every protocol, every training manual, every horror. Story from the past 8 months would scream the same message. "Shoot first, ask questions later, down here." She called out, then immediately regretted it as the sound of running footsteps and clattering equipment grew closer. The Vorak's glow intensified, and it let out a low, warning growl that made Mira's bones vibrate. It had heard human voices before, probably. Right before plasma fire had left those scars on its hide, Major O'Loran appeared at the ravine's edge first, his assault rifle already in his hands. Behind him came Sergeant Luna Voss and Private Chen Wei, both armed and moving with the fluid. Precision of combat veterans. Their faces went through the same sequence of emotions as they processed the scene below. Relief at finding Mira alive, confusion at her condition, and then pure terror as they registered her companion. "Holy shit," Voss breathed. "Castellanos, don't move, we'll get you out of there." "Wait!" Mira struggled to sit up straighter, ignoring the lance of pain through her broken leg. "Don't shoot! It's not what you think!" But Major Oleron was already bringing his weapon to bear, his scarred face grim with determination. "Like hell it isn't. That thing's probably been playing with you, waiting for backup to arrive. Standard predator behavior." The first plasma bolt scorched the air inches from the Vorak's head. The creature could have dodged easily. Mira had seen how fast it could move, but instead it did something that defied every assumption about its species. It spread its arms wide and stepped directly in front of her, using its massive body as a living shield. The second bolt struck its center mass, carving a burning line across its chest armor. The Vorak staggered but held its position, that thrumming sound now rising to a desperate crescendo. Its 6 eyes never left Mira's face, as if drawing strength from her presence. "Stop!" Mira screamed, trying to crawl forward despite her injury. "You're making a mistake. It saved my life." "The hell it did," Oleron snarled, adjusting his aim. "Those things don't save anything. They just kill and kill until—" The third shot never came. Private Chenwei's drone, hovering silently above the ravine for documentation purposes, captured everything in perfect high-definition clarity. The massive predator that every human on Threxus had learned to fear, deliberately taking fire to protect an injured scientist. Its alien features twisted not with rage or hunger, but with unmistakable anguish as each bolt found its mark, and Mira, tears streaming down her face, reaching out toward the creature with desperate affection. "Sir," Chenwei's voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, you need to see this footage." The Major's finger froze on the trigger as Chen patched the drone's feed to his tactical display. The recording showed the past 2 days, in fast forward, the Vorak bringing food and water, standing guard through the night, responding to Mira's voice with gentle thrums and careful gestures. "Jesus Christ!" Sergeant Voss lowered her weapon. It's taking care of her." The Vorak swayed on its feet, green fluid seeping from the fresh wounds. But it maintained its protective stance, even as its strength began to fail. Mira finally understood why the creature had stayed. It wasn't just kindness or even gratitude. It was hope, the same hope that had driven her into the wilderness in the first place. The hope that understanding was possible, even between species that had only known each other as enemies. The hope that someone, somewhere, might finally see beyond the scars, and the fear to find the person underneath. The bridge between worlds. 6 months after the rescue in the ravine, Dr. Mira Castellanos stood before the Threxos Colonial Council, her repaired leg steady beneath her as she addressed the assembled leaders. The chamber buzzed with tension. Military commanders sat beside civilian administrators, their faces reflecting the deep divisions that had torn the colony apart since Chenwei's footage had gone viral across human space. "The data is irrefutable," Mira said, advancing to the next slide. In her presentation, Vorak social structures are far more complex than our initial assessment suggested. They operate in extended family units, show clear evidence of tool use, and demonstrate emotional responses that parallel many mammalian species from Earth. General Patricia Hawthorne, the colony's military commander, leaned forward in her chair. "Dr. Castellanos, with all due respect to your unique experience, we cannot ignore the fact that these creatures have killed 43 colonists in 8 months. Your single encounter doesn't erase that history." "No, it doesn't," Mira agreed. "But it does force us to ask why those attacks happened. Every incident occurred when human expansion threatened Vorak nesting grounds or food sources. They weren't random acts of violence, they were defensive responses." She clicked to a detailed map of the colony's expansion zones, overlaid with data from her months of field research. "The individual I encountered, whom I've designated as Specimen A1, has been documented repeatedly approaching the settlement perimeter, not to attack, but to observe, to understand us, just as I've been trying to understand them." The creature she'd privately named Karun had become something of a legend among the colonists. Security footage showed it watching construction crews from the tree line, always staying just beyond weapon range. Children reported glimpses of glowing eyes in the forest during their supervised outdoor activities. Most remarkably, 3 separate incidents had been recorded, where Vorak had actively avoided harming humans who'd wandered into their territory, instead herding them back toward the settlement like protective shepherds. The neural scans are particularly compelling, continued Dr. James Park, the colony's chief medical officer, who had become Mira's strongest ally in the council. The tissue samples that specimen A1 voluntarily provided show brain structures remarkably similar to Earth's higher primates. Areas associated with empathy, problem-solving, and social bonding are highly developed. Councilwoman Elizabeth Torres raised her hand. What exactly are you proposing, Dr. Castellanos? We can't simply ignore the security threat. Mira took a deep breath. This was the moment she'd been building toward for months. I'm proposing a formal first contact protocol, a structured attempt at communication and peaceful coexistence. The chamber erupted in heated discussion. General Hawthorne's voice cut through the noise. Absolutely not. I won't risk colonist lives on the basis of one creature's anomalous behavior. It's not anomalous, Mira shot back. It's normal. We're the anomaly. We're the ones who came to their world and started shooting before we tried to understand. She activated the final slide, showing Chenwei's footage one more time. Even after months of repeated viewings, the image never failed to move her. Karun's massive form shielding her from plasma fire, its 6 eyes filled with determination and trust. This is what courage looks like, she said quietly. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Karun had every reason to hate humans. We'd scarred them, driven them from their territory, killed members of their family. Group. But when given the choice between revenge and compassion, they chose compassion. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone had expected. 7 in favor of Mira's proposal, 5 against. General Hawthorne's expression was thunderous, but she nodded curtly. Very well. Dr. Castellanos, you have authorization for limited contact attempts. But any sign of aggression, any threat to colonist safety, and this experiment ends permanently. 3 days later, Mira found herself back in the purple forest, her research team maintaining a respectful distance as she approached the clearing where Karun waited. The Vorak's wounds had healed into new scars, but their posture remained as gentle as she remembered when she held out the peace offering, a carefully crafted sculpture made from local materials, depicting a human and Vorak standing together. Karun's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a warm, welcoming gold. The thrumming sound they made was deeper now, more complex. It took Mira a moment to realize what she was hearing, not just recognition or gratitude, but hope. The same hope that had driven her into the wilderness, that had convinced her to trust a predator when every instinct screamed against it. The hope that 2 species, scarred by misunderstanding and violence, might still find a way to build something better together. As Karun carefully accepted the sculpture and began to create their own offering in return, an intricate arrangement of stones and flowering vines, Mira smiled. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time since arriving on Threxos, she believed it was possible. They had taken the first step across the bridge between worlds, and on the other side she could see the faint outline of a future, where fear no longer defined first contact, a future where trust, not weapons, opened the door to the stars.